Doctor Strange is a very specific kind of superhero. Instead of patrolling the city for muggers or bank robbers, he fights demons and warlords from other dimensions and deals with the manifestations of otherwise abstract concepts like eternity and death. But while his bizarre, mind-bending adventures have made him one of the weirder characters in the Marvel Universe, the Good Doctor has left huge footprints on the cultural landscape. From Steve Ditko's psychedelic extra-dimensional landscapes to his numerous connections to the world of rock and roll, here's the truth behind Dr. Stephen Strange. Who wants to live forever? In 1974's Doctor Strange No. 4, the Sorcerer battles death, literally. Inside the orb of Agamotto, Doctor Strange is confronted with the character Death, the same skeletal woman whose tender affections have always been craved by Thanos. Strange fights hard to free himself, but ultimately recalls the Ancient One's teachings about how death is just another part of life. After letting death overcome him, he awakens to find that this was merely the first in a series of trials that he must confront as the Sorcerer Supreme. As a result of his surrender to death, Doctor Strange is now actually ageless. He can still die, but only from being killed by others. As far as natural causes are concerned, he'll be around after most of us are dust, playing cards with Thor and Wolverine. The Sorcerer Supreme vs. Amy Grant. In 1986, Christian singer Amy Grant released a greatest hits compilation titled The Collection. 4 years later, a Marvel Comics artist decided Amy Grant could look a lot like a vampire. The similarity did not go unnoticed, and Amy Grant's managers brought Marvel Comics to court. Their complaint cited the comics' connections to witchcraft and the occult, and how associating Amy Grant with such a comic could do irreparable injury to her reputation among Christian fans. The two parties settled in 1991, and while we don't know the terms of the agreement, we do know one thing. If you look up the digital version of Doctor Strange Sorcerer Supreme No. 15 today, you'll find an empty red background replacing Amy Grant's borrowed face. Too many zeros. In 2012, the New York Post tried to speak to Steve Ditko, the creator of Doctor Strange and co-creator of Spider-Man. It didn't work out, mainly because Ditko is legendarily averse to talking to the media. He did, however, answer one question. When they asked if he received any money for any of the Spider-Man films that had been released up to that point, he simply said no. But that might not be entirely accurate. In 2016, Abraham Reisman stalked out Steve Ditko's Manhattan studio, hoping to get a few words with the reclusive creator. The best he managed was to get Ditko to answer his studio door, which Ditko promptly shut again after shaking his head in what Reisman describes as disgust. He had more luck with other people with offices in the building, including one unnamed woman who said she'd mistakenly received a check meant for Ditko, which she realized wasn't hers when it had, quote, too many zeros. If the story is true, that could mean there is some kind of agreement between Ditko and Sony or Marvel Studios. And if it's not Spider-Man, the most likely candidate is the Sorcerer Supreme. Doctor Strange is cool with Doctor Strange. While Steve Ditko might not want anything to do with the film adaptations of his creations, at least one of his creations feels differently. In the unbelievable Gwenpool No. 3, the title character makes an appointment with Doctor Strange. As a comic book reader from the real world who found herself transported to the Marvel Universe, Gwen has no valid social security number or other identifying information to give to her new employer, meaning that she doesn't get paid. While it's not Strange's usual problem, making fake IDs for travelers from another universe is certainly something he can do. When Strange peeks into Gwen's native dimension, he discovers the relationship between the real world and his own, specifically the film based on his own comics. While he might not be thrilled, he definitely seems okay with the casting choice for the main character. The Doctor rocks. One of the first things we learn about Stephen Strange in the 2016 film is that he has an encyclopedic knowledge of modern music. But it shouldn't have come as a surprise, since Doctor Strange has a long history in the world of rock. Judging by the covers, the song titles, and the lyrics, his biggest impact was on Pink Floyd, who used interior art from Strange Tales No. 158 on the cover to their 1968 album Saucer Full of Secrets. It doesn't stop there. T-Rex mentioned Doctor Strange in Mambo Sun on the 1971 album Electric Warrior. In 1965, Jefferson Airplane, The Charlatans, The Great Society, and others appeared on a handbill for a concert they called A Tribute to Doctor Strange. The prize for the most elaborate tribute to the Sorcerer Supreme, though, has to go to Al Stewart. The album art for 1974's Past, Present, and the Future and 1975's Modern Times both feature Doctor Strange, leaping into a portal and then appearing in a flash of light before a mansion. The clothes make the man. In 1968, Doctor Strange took over Strange Tales as his own comic, but sales began to slump. To shake things up, his costume was altered to a more superheroic look, but the most interesting detail here isn't the costume itself, it's the ridiculous way it was explained. Doctor Strange number 177 opens with Strange and his lover Clea banished to another dimension by a villain who mystically disguised himself in Strange's form. When Strange attempts to re-enter his own dimension, an unseen mystical barrier stops him because there's already someone there who looks like him. That's right, to fool the magical, mystical boundaries of the universe itself, Doctor Strange casts a spell that changes his costume and creates a mask, because apparently that's all it takes. Maybe he just should have tried glasses. The Substitute Supreme. Before Marvel's Netflix heroes took the name, the comic book Defenders were a very different group with lots and lots of incarnations. While the roster would change a dozen times over the years, Doctor Strange was almost always part of the team, which is pretty ironic since writer Roy Thomas originally didn't want him involved at all. In a 2013 interview, Thomas said he wanted the lineup from a story he wrote called Titans 3, with the Hulk, Namor, and the Silver Surfer. Unfortunately for Thomas, Stan Lee was very protective of the Silver Surfer and hadn't been thrilled by Titans 3. To match the Surfer's cosmic power, he suggested that Thomas use Doctor Strange instead, which is exactly what he did in Marvel Feature Issue number 1. This time, it seems Lee approved. Once the Defenders got their own title a few months later, the Silver Surfer joined the team in issue number 2. Galactus? By the way, Doctor Strange is powerful. So powerful that even Galactus, the Devourer of Worlds, is no problem at all. Well, that might be an exaggeration, but when the Avengers and Fantastic Four combined forces against Galactus, Doctor Strange was the one who turned the tide with a spell that froze the Devourer in his tracks. The heroes took advantage, and once the smoke cleared, the Sorcerer revealed that the spell he cast forced Galactus to confront the ghosts of all those he has slain. Considering Galactus has destroyed entire worlds, it's easy to see why this particular tactic was effective. Thanks for watching. Click the looper icon to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Plus, check out all this cool stuff we know you'll love too.